Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where we talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Season 1, Episode 2 of The Imperfects. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Once again, just definitely giving me more and more Misfits vibe, because of the whole situation of, like the guy we later on find out his name is Doug, we find out his situation is, so it is a little bit more Deadpoolish than I thought, that he kind of has a somewhat version of immortality. He has an extremely strong healing factor, and obviously the conversation came up of because Abby ended up stabbing him in the heart, but his heart started healing, and they're like, cool. And Juan's like, right, we might have to go full Highlander here and cut off his head. That might be the only solution, but it's like, oh, we're not going to cut off his head. And then you had Tilda immediately chop off his head, and now it's a situation of they're burying him. It's like, well, we don't even really know you. We could have helped each other. Maybe if we just had a conversation. And it's like, right, we killed you twice. And then Abby was like, the moment he said that, I was like, well, technically you killed him 3 times. And then Abby's like, we killed him 3 times. It's like, yeah. At the very least, the blame kind of goes 3 ways, because you guys killed him 1 time each, so it's not just on Juan anymore. So it's like, yeah, Abby killed him the 2nd time, and Tilda killed him. I mean, at the very least, I think you can make the argument those 2 killed him in self-defense. Abby just kind of, Tilda ended up just straight up murdering and decapitating him. So, but them just kind of burying his body. That's what, if you don't know, once again, why I even reference that being very Misfits is that's what they kind of did. They were just like, well, shit, something terrible happened. We have to bury some bodies. And that happened quite a few times with was essentially kind of their parole officer to some extent. There was a few they had to bury, so it just kind of gave me kind of that similar vibe. And I was wondering, right, you would probably have to do the thing, and I was right that you'd have to dismember his body and then keep his body parts away from each other. That's the only way he stays dead. But it's later on they needed him reattached, so they brought his head back, which his healing factor is super fucked, because for him it's even if I'm dead, I'm not dead, I can still feel everything. He was like, yeah, I even felt cardboard, and Abby got in front of the cardboard box that his head was in, was like, oh, let's kind of ignore that and move on. And so I was like, because he first discovered it because he cut himself shaving and the wound healed instantly, but the pain was there. I'm like, oh man, it's one of those effed up things where no matter what he heals from, he constantly feels the pain of it. Because the wound heals, the pain never goes away. Because it's almost like there's a Netflix show, a Korean show called Bugasu Immortal Souls. The main antagonist, his whole thing is he has a wound that's constantly healing, but it won't fully heal. So it's constantly it's healing and reopening. So basically that's every wound he's feeling. He's constantly feeling the pain of an open wound, even though it's technically healed on the surface. So it's especially considering he got stabbed in the heart multiple times by Abby. I mean, granted, he had his neck ripped out by Juan and probably other stuff as well. He was cut open to be autopsied, plus Tilda sliced his head off. So all that pain is just hitting him all at once. It's that's a miserable existence. So, because they found out that, Doug was following them. And I guess in the long run, he was following all the test subjects he was aware of, trying to see if any of them would lead him to Sarkov. Because he didn't know about their respective circumstances that they were developing abilities, but he was probably keeping an eye on them, wondering if they were or not. I don't know if he was aware, obviously, of Juan doing the whole chupacabra thing, which each one of them's kind of got to deal with their respective situations. Abby's dealing with the fallout with one of her closest friends. It's you kind of saw him kind of go a little wild because of your pheromones, and it's seeing him it's not his fault, but seeing him like that, some ravaged animal, some savage animal, it kind of paints a picture of him, because it also makes you go I could never let my guard down around you. I guess it's right, it kind of shows that that's somewhere inside of you. Yeah, my pheromones brought it out, but it's still somewhere inside of you, and I'd have to be on guard the entire time, because I could never let my pheromones get too close to you, because if I do, you could turn into that. And again, it's because she has her friends Jules and Paul. Paul was a more supportive friend. Jules was kind of a dick in the first episode, she's kind of quick to shoot your happiness down. It's yes, I got the interview, I'm so excited, I should get ready to pack and stuff like that, maybe make it so my bills or whatever don't get, and it's oh no, maybe you should actually get accepted first. She got rain on her parade, but Paul was like the more supportive one, so it kind of like really bugs her the most, especially like she can't really rely on him. She can't really rely on probably her closest friend at the time when she needs him. Tilda's dealing with I think I called him Simon last episode, but Simon's the other dude. Her boyfriend is PJ, which he kind of thinks she's crazy, and she's like, I know that you kicked me out of the band, I heard it. And she proved like, no, I can hear you from far away, I'm trying to get this undone. And it's like, well, the whole replacing you is only temporary thing. It's like, yeah, but for her, it's like, at the very least, let me be a part of the conversation. You know you're in the wrong because you're having those conversations behind my back. You know, at the very least, for her, it's like, at the very least, she'd have hope that PJ would have her back. That it's like, hey, at least you kind of stick up for me, but you were so okay with, like, you put up, like, the smallest amount of fight, like, hey, come on, okay, sure, and you gave up so easily, you couldn't be, like, stick up for me despite what we have going on. It's like, I get it, the band's important, it's important to her, too, because music has been her way, and she talked about it in the first episode, and I didn't talk about it, like, how important music is for her, and I think that is the sad irony that, like, it's kind of been taken from her, because she can't sing, she can't concentrate, because of like every noise, just hearing every single thing all the time. Like it's like the sensory overload from a hearing perspective in her case. Then you have Juan, who's dealing with the situation of his girlfriend. He has to kind of lie to her and can't really tell her the truth about his circumstances. He touched on some stuff about like, right, she's kind of had bad luck with relationships in the past, and it makes her a little skittish because she's worried like, oh, Hannah, like, she's like, oh, you're just coming home. Like, who's this Hannah? It's like, oh, it's someone from the program. It's like, oh, so is that who you were with? It's like, no. Me and some guys, we were going to, you know, he made sure not to be like, he kept it generic being like guys, but she's assuming guys, could probably don't want to let her know that you're hanging out with Tilda and, Abby, especially considering he does have a crush on Abby. It's still, not Abby, Tilda, it's still there. So, but I'm assuming that's going to become more and more of an issue. Well, with the way the episode ends, it might not be an issue, but we'll have to wait and see. But Tilda was like, oh, you could tell her the truth. Like, oh, your circumstances isn't that bad. Because, I mean, granted, it's a little more manageable if it was more of a werewolf situation where you only had to worry about full moons. It's like, your transformations kind of happen anytime. You can't fully control them. So I wonder, is it like a Hulk situation of like your emotions kind of take the control of you, like, and that's what sparks, or you a combination of being afraid, being angry, like heightened emotions trigger it. So if he can like learn how to control it, but we'll see. What's also interesting too is the introduction to Sydney's circumstances. Like, she's having these constant nightmares where like this hooded figure, because at first, like, when she was like, oh, I found the files, and then like someone was like walking behind her, I thought at first, I was like, oh my god, is it Hannah? Is her power invisibility? We don't know what Hannah's power is, but it seems like she does have one. We'll get to that later. But then it's like this faceless being that like bashes her in with a hammer, but then she starts realizing like all throughout the episode she's sleepwalking, and then like later on she's trying to take some medication and it's blue, and you're like, oh, so you're I mean, to be fair, it's like, right, she has the same genetic condition that they do as well, so now she's probably wondering like, right, should I be taking it? Like, these nightmares are getting worse because I don't think she's not taking her medication like she should, but it might be getting to that point that it's like it's not working anymore. So, because she was looking at it from the wrong perspective. Once again, they initially thought it was all in the nucleus, but she never found out from Alex what it was necessarily that he was connected, what he ended up discovering. But now it makes you wonder, could she be responsible for his disappearance? Because it turns out, at least what it seems like her power is kind of similar to Wands, where she transforms, but it's into like another entity, but it's like a whole other personality that is got its own goals, and it's its own sentient thing. Whereas like Wand is probably driven more so by like animalistic instinct. This thing is like its own thing. So I think it could be responsible for Alex disappearing, but like she's doing stuff in her sleep, and it meant, because that's this thing taking over, you know. I guess you can make a comparison to like kind of a symbiote type of situation, but also, like I said, just kind of like a split personality. Very like, you know, a recent example would be like kind of like a Moon Knight thing, like you're blacking out type of thing. Once again, I feel like Wanda's circumstances are probably like the closest to what she's going through. And then there's that line at the end where she looked in her mirror and written in blood is like, they must be destroyed. So whatever, I guess like you know what it is? It probably is her being a scientist. It's probably like a metaphor. It's like probably like this show's take on a Jekyll and Mr. Hyde type of thing. So that might be more what that is. It's like that thing represents her darker instincts, and it's like maybe it sees them as abominations that need to be destroyed. I think that's what it is, and that part, there's a part of her feeling like, these things are mistakes. She keeps being like, you guys aren't monsters, but I think some very deep inside this other side of her, this darker side of her, believes they are monsters and needs to be the hammer of justice or axe of justice that's going to cleave them or smash them, to kill them. Because like she also kind of comes off like asshole-ish in this episode because she has no bedside manner. Like when it comes to the whole like, Doug wants to die thing, which is understandable. He's in constant pain, so it's like, hey, I'll help you find Sarkov, but you're gonna have to kill me, like super permanently kill me. So it's like, all right, like I'll inject him with something, he'll basically fall asleep, and then we'll dismember his body and burn it in acid. It's like, that's super fucked up. It's like, we kind of have no choice. But once again, like she's so scientific about it, like there's no emotion behind it. She's not, and I don't know, it didn't seem like, she's so matter of fact is what it is. And it seems like there's no like humanity behind her words. She's just so like, whatever, blasé about it, like where all this other stuff seems to be bothering the others and they're kind of finding and dealing with it. It seems like she's just so like I said, she's just so pragmatic about it, and it just feels like she's removing the human element from it. So part of me wonders, is that part of that other side of herself creeping in more and more, causing that, or was she always like that to some extent? I mean, Tilda feeling bad for Doug, realizing like what he's going through, that he just wanted to sign up for like the experiments because he wanted to make himself better, like stronger, faster, and then he tried to go to Sarkov to get fixed, but it never worked, it never happened. That's why he's trying to find Sarkov now. But it's like, right, if you ever shake that guy's hand again, make sure you count your fingers, because you can't trust a guy like him considering all that he's done. And Tilda felt bad about what was going to happen to Doug, and Doug decided, like, right, if he's going to go out on his, because once again, even if he gets dismembered, even if he's technically dead, even being like drugged, his body is still going to feel everything, because who knows if the drugs, because considering his healing factor, who knows how like because it might be one of those things like his healing makes it so like it never stays in metabolism too long, like your heroes like the Hulk or specifically as we learned with like the Hulk and She-Hulk recently, that they can drink, and because of their metabolism, or even like the Flash, his metabolism's so fast that he can't get drunk because it burns through his body so fast. So what if like Doug's healing factor is like that and makes it so that the drugs don't even ever fully set in because of that? So he would have felt everything, where it wouldn't have been a painless death. So he decided to go on his own terms and basically blew himself up, and they dumped his remains down they got some buckets, scooped him up and poured him down the septic tank. But I'm like, yeah, but there's probably going to be a fucked up thing of he might be liquidy. I mean, because at least acid left nothing behind. In this case, he still pools of blood, so it still might, once again, he might be on some Deadpool shit, so he might still be able to come from it. Because like the reason why I keep saying Deadpool, because that's I'm not well versed in comics in general, but my understanding, like, Deadpool has the most ridiculous healing factor of any character in existence. Like, I think it's even the smallest thing is what Deadpool can kind of return from. Like, even the smallest bit of himself that's left is enough to fully regenerate himself. It's like that fucking ridiculous. So, at least to my understanding, I think I was kind of treating it more like a more traditional healing factor, that using the Highlander example, like only thing that can kill you is getting beheaded. Very like zombie rules to some extent, but because Tilda was trying to handle things, I guess it's like, right, she couldn't find a solution for her circumstances, and she got to know Doug now. It's like, right, you're actually not the bad guy I thought you were. And it's like, right, you're just like us. You were an unfortunate victim in all of this, and they wanted to try and do some good for him. But just when they were about to give up, Burke's like the one like, no, we need to keep going. It's like, well, you're not just saying that for their sake. You're also saying it for your own sake. But she doesn't confide. She had that dream. She confided in Abby, but she doesn't. She's still keeping it to herself, I believe. But when it's all said and done, they go back to the lab because they are initially won and Abby didn't find anything. Luckily, you have the human, which I'm also, part of me wonders is like, well, she probably can, eventually if she hones it even more, she'll probably be able to tell when someone's lying. Very Daredevil-esque, where it's like, right, someone's changing heartbeat could give away like whether they're lying or not. But they ultimately ended up finding like his secret room because of Tilda. And I actually looked into it. If you are curious, I know sometimes people ask, like, put it out there, like, asking what a song is. This is an instance where I can actually tell you what the song is because I was curious about it and I looked it up. The song is called Monster by Paris, which I'd never... I was like, oh, I didn't realize that was one of their songs. It's a band I'm not well versed in. I think I heard one of their songs like years ago, but it's a band whose names I've seen pop up from time to time. I highly recommend it. If you want to look it up, it's PVRIS. I think I don't know whether the V is supposed to be kind of like a upside down A or whether it is just straight up a V, but I think it is just pronounced. I do believe it's just pronounced Paris. But yeah, the song is called Monster. It's actually a relatively, well, it's like from like 2021, so it's not like an older song. I figure, because some songs that get it, usually you're like, oh, maybe they're from a couple years ago. It's like, no, this is only from like last year, so. Like, actually, I think it's over, tangents and all that time. But I was like, oh, because I really was listening to something. I was like, ooh, this sounds like a really catchy song. So, in case you're curious, it's Monster by Paris. So, either way, found the laptop, found a cage, and you're like, oh, a cage in a scientist's lab, never a good sign. But they ended up finding Hannah, which Abby ended up talking to her. And there was just the way Hannah, like, approached the whole thing. She seemed so, once again, kind of almost like Burke, where it's like, kind of had no bedside manner. You were very blasé about everything. And also the fact that and I think that should have been, like, the key sign. It's like, the moment Abby was like, oh, I'm a succubus, which I forgot that's what she kind of described herself as last episode. Succubus, Juan's a chupacabra, Tilda's a banshee, and it's like, oh yeah, that makes sense and stuff like that. But it's like, she was so accepting of it. She was not like, oh, you're crazy. PJ immediately thought she was that Tilda was crazy the moment she mentioned her circumstances. But then it's kind of like, well, she was so accepting of it, and that should have been the key sign something's off. But she says that she's still dying because, unlike the others, the synthetic stem cells didn't quite, like, her body rejected them over and over again. And now the theory is that's why Sarkov was so interested in her, because if he can find out and isolate why her body's rejecting him, it could give him an answer to be like, okay, I found a way to make the stem cells even stronger, and as they say later on, he's still trying to make his perfect monster. Because this whole interesting thing because Doug is still a failure, because it's an unintentional side effect. It's like, right, a lot of scientists are still, like, trying to aim for the immortality thing. And she says, like, right, a lot of scientists are aiming towards that. I mean, it's just kind of like that human nature thing of not wanting to die. So it's understandable why quite a few scientists would be working on it. But apparently, like, for Sarkov and Sydney, it's not something that they're really concerned about. So it's so blasé that they're just like, no, we're not for that. So I guess maybe he's trying to make the perfect human or whatever, like, be able to create like a new species. It's probably just like, right, what science can create. Once again, they're on their Frankenstein shit. So I think that'd probably be, once again, a very apt description for Victor in that regard. Just would be that whole thing. So did I call him Victor? I think I meant Alex Sarkov. I think I actually just straight up just called him Victor. Jesus. All of them ended up kind of walking away from their respective situations. Obviously, like, Abby having to, like, seal up her room to make sure none of her, like, pheromones ever escaped through any cracks in the room. But she's also avoided Paul the entire episode. And she texts him back. He's like, I'll never forgive myself for what I did. And she's like, you're not a monster. Then you have Tilda. Once again, I think I brought it up last episode. I think her sarcastic nature is her way to kind of, like, deal with things in her own right, trying to be, make it seem like things aren't weighing on her as much as they are. But she goes to try and, like, check on the band, but she can't get anywhere near, and she's hearing them practice with Rose and everything. So it's just like, right, I can't, it is something so important to her, but it's like, right, the thing that I love, singing and being a part of music, I can't do anything about it right now with the way I am, because if she does try and sing or anything, she's going to just go full-blown banshee and break glass. You know why I guess I should have also thought about it, and that's another show I should have compared it to, just because it is on my mind, because speaking of banshees, I was like, the first banshee that should have come to my mind was Lydia from Teen Wolf. I still need to go back and rewatch Teen Wolf again, like in totality. I've seen, I think the first 4 or 5 seasons, I've seen them now like twice, but I've never seen the second half of season 5 or the final season 6. I've never seen any of that like a second time. I've only seen them once, I think. Tensions and all that aside, because, you know, Lydia being a banshee and how, like, her, I wonder will, probably won't work the same way with, Tilda, how, like, being out, how Tilda probably can't redirect it like Lydia. That was the whole point. Regardless, there's also the situation with Juan that Daisy came back and opened the door, and it might have been while he was transformed, not unless it was someone else in his apartment, but it seemed like it was most likely him. And there was also the thing of, like, right, Tilda made some reference to, like, right, we need to kind of get on top of this because you don't want to end up killing your girlfriend or something like that. And it's like, well, hopefully he didn't, but if he did, that's going to stick with him. I even love that thing where it's just kind of like, he's like, yeah, you know, he's like, I haven't really been thinking about it, but it's like, yeah, the dogs and the raccoons and the people I've killed. And she's like, how many dogs have you killed? And he's like, and raccoons and people. She's like, yes, but how many dogs? I'm like, I love that that's what you're focusing on. But they do have a long list of his other, Sarkov's other experiments, so it gives him breadcrumbs to, it's like, obviously Sarkov must be trying to trace, like, his other experiments and see where they're standing, so they got a list of people to check out. Once again, see who, you know, it's going to be interesting to see what powers everyone got, but especially Hannah, especially because she had that conversation with Isabel. Because I was thinking Isabel might be that type of person, like, oh, we're capturing all the experiments and we're going to, like, really poke and prod them. But it seems like Isabel wants to go after Sarkov, but she's getting Hannah to go after all the scientists that are, like, a part of, like, this research and stuff like that. They could be appetizers. So I'm like, so she might be kind of similar to Juan. Because she was kind of like, yeah, it was nice to see you, Abby. Tell Juan I said hi, and tell Tilda to go fuck herself. Which is like, oh, hey, Hannah said hi to both of you. And Tilda being like, really? She usually tells me to go fuck myself. But part of me wonders is, like, could there be a little commonality between her and Juan? The reason why she said that, because maybe she's kind of something else too, some transformative situation. But we'll have to wait and see. I'm curious, like, is Isabel in the same regard, because she has such beef with Sarkov just in that first episode, but now knowing, like, right, she's trying to hunt him down too, and she's like, yeah, let that trio, that quartet, including Burke, Sydney, like, let them find him first. It makes my job a little easier. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see where that kind of goes from there, kind of finding out what they're really all about in Hannah's circumstances. Like, she didn't really dive into it, but I think she has like I said, a monster transformation, considering that whole, like, oh, I can eat type of mind. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see where the next episode ends up taking us going forward with all of that. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.